Hi, welcome to the Late Night Cool Down. I'm your host, Kyle Antoine, and let's get into this episode. So, today's episode is going to be safeguarding your future, how to handle toxic relationships with yourself and others. And I was going to prepare notes, I was going to prepare statistics. But statistics can get boring, and like a quick Google search and you already got it, right? So look up the statistics on what we talk about in this podcast, and you'll be astounded on what you find. So my philosophy in handling toxic relationships is this. If you have an unhealthy or toxic or whatever unhealthy relationship with yourself, that's going to emanate into every single person that you find, whether they themselves are a toxic person or not. And we should define what we should define what toxic means. So in this case, my definition of toxic is someone who is not good for you, someone who not just not good for you, but actively brings you down, or someone who brings out characteristics that aren't typical for you, that are negative, right? So toxic, I don't mean toxic people are evil. I don't think they're malevolent necessarily. Sometimes they can be or are, but my pure definition of a toxic person is someone that is not good for you and actively brings out, the worst parts of ourselves. So I just wanted to clarify that, because, we can get carried away in today's society of throwing that label on people. You're toxic, you're toxic, you're toxic. So I want to be very clear. Just because you may disagree with someone, a disagreement is not necessarily toxic. Purely disagree with someone, that's not toxic, right? Anyways, let's move on. So my philosophy is, if you have a loving, graceful, respectful, and kind relationship with yourself, your inner child, your inner being, who you are in the present moment, then you're going to have, relationships that are loving, respectful, and kind. And this is not a one-size-fits-all approach to relationships. And relationships, to me, are not just romantic or intimate, but they are also your friendships and your family and strangers and acquaintances. A relationship. How deep or how far it goes or how far it doesn't go and the sorts, it doesn't really matter. But when you have a good relationship with yourself, and you're going to find, people who reflect that, that's not always the case. And I'm leaning towards specifically with family members, the people that you were born living with, your siblings, your parents, whoever raised you, close family members, the people that you didn't have a choice to be around, whether you liked it or not. They were there. So don't think that I'm saying that even if you feel you do have a good relationship with yourself, but you're still dealing with toxic people, that means you're toxic. Let's get that out of the way. You're not necessarily, right? In that circumstance. So when we get to that point where we are loving ourselves, we know what we are worth, humbly. And to me, humble just means to see things, people, and places as they are. You get leveled with it, right? You're not above and you're not below it. You're not bigger than it and you're not smaller than it. You're with it, right? You're just there with it. It doesn't mean anything other than that, what it is, who it is, So when we get to that point where we know our worth, we're taking care of ourselves, we respect ourselves, we like ourselves, or we love ourselves, and then we like ourselves, and so on and so forth. We've created a good habits. We got a good sleep schedule. We're financially sound. Not meaning you got to be wealthy or rich, but like, you're taking care of yourself. You're taking care of yourself. You're taken care of, right? And then you're dealing with toxic family members, for example. I despise the sentiment that just because someone is your parent, a mom or a dad, or a caregiver, or just because you spent a long time with someone, or they're your sibling, your brother or your sister, or your cousin or your aunt or your uncle, or whoever, I despise the sentiment that you owe them you. If relationships by nature are at some form or another transactional, it's a business. And we're dealing in the business of love when we are talking about relationships. And I don't mean that, I want to clarify what I mean by it's a business. I don't mean that, you get something, you're only there because you get something out of it. But by nature, when you are in a friendship with someone, what do you both get out of it? You both get, care. You get someone who listens to you and understands you and validates what you're feeling. And a good friend's going to call you on your shit, humbly and respectfully. And not let you, or like try and like, not allow you to, or like be like, hey, maybe don't do that, right? So what I'm trying to get to is, how do we handle these situations where we are doing good within ourselves, but then there's people around us that aren't doing good for themselves and are bringing that to us and either taking it out on us or, trying to give their shit to us for us to handle, right? So how do we deal with that? So what I've learned is, first you tell them, hey, I do not want to do that, or, that's your stuff, not mine. Boundaries. You verbalize your boundaries, and when you set a boundary with someone, you have to back it up, because people are going to, at least initially, like people you've known for a while, they're initially going to test your boundaries, and they're going to cross your boundaries time and time again to see what you are actually going to take. And in my experience, and in my humble opinion, those are the people that you do not want to be around anyways. And so, I would personally cut them off. If I had spoken my boundaries and there's no changed behavior, then there's no relationship. It's a partnership is a better word than business, but it is a business. Life is a business. It's an exchange. I have this and you have that. Let's, do a trade, or let's do a mutually beneficial agreement. That's what relationships are, mutually beneficial agreements. And if I'm not mutually benefiting, if you're not giving me the love or the care or the ear that I need, or, whatever it is, like the love or just time or just fun, and I'm giving it to you, but you're not giving it to me, then that's not a relationship. That's me, expending myself. That's you taking from me without giving anything in return, and that is disrespectful. And what do we do with disrespectful people? We cut them off and we ignore them. And so when we deal with family, it can get a bit tricky. When you're older, when you have your own place to live, you can afford yourself and your lifestyle, you really don't got to answer to nobody. Oh, what is my family going to think? What is my family going to say? Well, does it matter? To me, it doesn't. I know myself. I know my worth. I got my people, my friends, my community. I don't need you. Right? Like, I am doing very well, and maybe you're not doing very well, and so in that situation, what you should do is, regardless of how much it hurts to let somebody go, to block somebody, to go no contact, to set your boundaries, whatever the case may be, when you're sticking up for yourself, the price of freedom is pain. You gotta do what is necessary to make sure you don't go insane dealing with these types of people, because they will take from you, not just financially, because they do that, not just socially or whatever the case may be, but also mentally and emotionally. They're going to take from you. And what do you get in return? You get nothing in return dealing with these toxic people, right? So what do we do in the case that someone isn't healed, someone doesn't love themselves, someone's not taking care of themselves, and maybe even being abusive towards themselves? What do we do in that situation? Well, in that situation, we got to take a step away from whatever's going on, people, places, or things, and pause. We got to put a pause on. We got to hit the pit stop for real quick. And we got to do what I call reflection, what everyone calls reflection. Okay, what am I doing? How did we get here? Why am I doing this? Why am I in this friendship, relationship, partnership, whatever ship? Why am I here? What do I get out of it? What do they get out of it? Is it healthy? Am I being healthy? Am I toxic? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But these are necessary questions to ask that will eventually get you to a point where you are in that position to, make sound decisions in your relationships and dealing with yourself. A broken heart is going to break it's going to break hearts. A broken heart's going to break hearts. A healed heart is going to heal hearts. If a heart was never broken, they're not going to, less experienced, but it's going to be a more typically it's going to be a more normal relationship, whatever relationship type. All right. If my mental health is to the shitter, then when I'm around people for long enough, their mental health is going to end up in the shitter too. And the same is the other way around. If I'm around someone who has terrible mental health and they don't, or refuse, or they're ignorant to getting help or being aware that they need the help, then they're going to affect my mental health in a very negative way. If someone has, toxic tendencies, someone who says toxic things or does toxic things to us, if I stay around that person long enough, guess what? I'm going to do the exact same things they're doing to me, to them, or to other people who don't deserve it, right? And so when we heal, when we get help, whether that's spiritually or in counseling, psychologically, or through therapy, when we begin the healing process, healing ourselves, our mind, our inner child, and listening to ourselves, and we get very clear on what we want in our lives, and if not, we get very clear on what we do not want in our lives. I personally do not want to fight with someone. We can have a disagreement, we can have a talk, we can have this or that, but I'm not going to argue with a grown effing adult, right? Get the F out of my face. And right? I don't want to be around someone who puts me in the position to where I have to argue with them. Period. Doesn't matter who you are. I'm not going to fucking argue with you, a grown man or a grown woman. I will tell you to shut the fuck up and get the fuck away from me, right? And that's my boundary if I need to go there. I don't like to go there. I do not want to go there, but I can go there. And that's where, the power is of being healed from me being toxic, me being me not being healthy in my being, me not being loving and graceful and accepting of myself, and then coming to a point where I am healthy, I am graceful, and I am loving, and I do take care of myself and all of that now, I can go there if I need to, right? But that's my power. I don't need to go there all the time. And if I'm around someone who makes me feel like I need to go there, I need to take it there, I need to say that, I need to do that to them to make them feel how I feel, then I shouldn't be around that person, right? So how do we deal with toxic parents? How do I deal with a mom who's overbearing, or a mom who's a victim, or a dad who's overbearing or plays the victim, or who won't acknowledge the wrongs they did and take responsibility and take the time to listen to the people to their kids who they hurt, or take the time to understand how their actions or inactions and words or lack of words affected their kids' upbringing. Parents love to pull you're an adult now. It's like, you've been an adult and you've been out of line for the longest time. Just because someone had sex, got pregnant, had kids, does not give them the right to abuse human beings. I'm tired of putting parents on a pedestal. Just because you fucked and something popped out of your vagina does not mean you have any authority to tell anybody anything. Most of the people I know, our parents, are dumb as fuck. I'm like, why the fuck would you have kids? And that is the raw truth. And I'm sure a lot of people share the same sentiment. The people who, would be good parents choose not to be because they think they're going to be bad parents. They see these other parents and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that to my kids if I ever had them, right? But that's the thing, though, that these toxic and sometimes narcissistic parents never think that way. They think they're right. They think that what they say goes. And it's like, hold on. That's not your kid. That's not your baby. That's not your teenager. That's its own individual human being, whole on its own human life. And just because it came out of you does not give you any right or authority to abuse them, whether physically, mentally, and emotionally, right? Or controlling them too much. Oh, you can't go hang out with your friends. And I gotta say, I am a firm believer in routine and discipline and doing the hard things. But you got to teach them how to do these things. These are skills that you learn over time. You're not born knowing how to get into a sleep routine. You're not born knowing how to say your fucking name, how to cook. These are skills that are supposed to be taught by the parents. And I'm sick and tired of parents shitting on their children because the parents were too irresponsible, undisciplined, and lazy bastards to fucking teach their kids how to live. And so then that leads to alcohol, that leads to drugs, that leads to abusive relationships in the future because they were taught no better and no different. So parents, get the fuck off your high horse. And to the good parents who take the time to understand their kids, who take the time to learn how to be a parent, to learn how to be a proper and healthy, loving authority figure in a young person's mind and life, I commend you, because it is a hard job. But to the people who do not even try, you can shut the fuck up. And I'll say it to your face. God bless the parents. God bless the kids. Right? But how do we deal with that? Well, if you're an adult now, 18 and up, then like a full legal, whatever. Then if your mom or your dad or your caregivers growing up, if they traumatized you, if they hurt you, whatever happened, I want to take a second to acknowledge that you are allowed to feel upset. You're allowed to feel disrespected. You're allowed to feel how you feel in regards to what happened to you. And it's okay. And you're not wrong. All right? Seek the help that you think will benefit you the most in your healing journey. But as an adult, as human beings, life goes on. If you need to set aside life for however long it takes to do the healing journey, do it. You will not regret it. But you must take personal responsibility for yourself, not what happened to you, not other people's actions or words or situations, but just for yourself in this moment. Take responsibility and make a commitment to yourself that you're not going to let this define you for the rest of your life, because there is so much freedom in healing from our past and letting it go and putting up boundaries and creating a new life where we hopefully don't have these experiences happen again, or at least very minimal. You know, I don't believe abusive, toxic, narcissistic, manipulative people, I don't demonize them, but I see them for what they are: insecure, traumatized. Maybe some are purely just pieces of shit, but a lot of these people are not evil. They're not malevolent. They're not, waking up in the morning or going to bed wishing, that the world burns for them, or at least around them, right? But, we were unhealthy. I'm going to say a good, 99.999% of people in life have been traumatized, have acted out in that trauma, and have caused harm to people who didn't deserve it, who didn't traumatize, we do it to people who didn't even hurt us, right? So if you're taking the time and the responsibility of your actions and yourself and how you are in this world and how you are in relationships, I commend you. I don't want to shit on people who have done that, because I've been toxic. Of course I have. I've been abusive. I've never hit or but abuse. When we think of abuse, we think of these very extreme cases, but that is how a lot of abuse goes unchecked in our personal relationships. Abuse isn't just hitting, like violence or sexual violence or verbal abuse. Abuse can be financial. Oh, I'm gonna borrow $20 from you and never pay you back. That's considered financial abuse. Yeah, you have an older grandparent, barely conscious, and your aunt goes and takes $5,000 from them. Oh, they won't know. That's financial abuse. That's elder abuse in that circumstance, right? I'm gonna borrow, like an example for me is one of my sisters, the oldest one, asked me for $800, right? Send her the $800 under false pretenses of she needed it for quote unquote down payment on a rental. First off, no one whatever. I was like, here's $800. I have the money right now. I can lend you $800. Guess what? 1,000. Yeah, pretty much 3 years later, haven't seen a cent or a penny, and she does not care. Because it doesn't affect her, right? That's financial abuse. Someone stealing your debit card, financial abuse. Someone stealing your credit card, that's financial abuse. In more extreme cases, when you're married and they control the finances and they only give you a certain amount of money, that's financial abuse. When they say, oh, if you don't do this for me, you're gonna get kicked out, that's financial abuse. And you can't afford to move out on your own, that's financial abuse. And we often don't think of these things as abuse, referring to the finances, but it is. Some other slight forms, we hear gaslighting a lot, right? What is gaslighting? Gaslighting is, I do something to you, you see it for what it is. You see the truth of what I did or said. And then you confront me on that behavior. And then I tell you that that's not how it happened. Or I just flat out say that didn't happen. I deny your reality. I do something. You confront me. I deny your reality. And I deny your reality. And I deny your reality. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Or this is actually how it happened. This is actually how it happened. And then over time, with repetition, you start questioning if what you see with your own eyes and what you hear with your own ears and what you have memorized, what you think, you second guess your own reality. That is what gaslighting is, right? And it's a very subtle but very dark form of manipulation. If you're questioning your reality, then I get to define what your reality is. See how fucked up that is? And so when we are most susceptible to it is when we're not healed, when we have an unhealthy relationship with ourselves. Because if I am financially stable on my own and I take care of my mental health and my spiritual health, if I choose to do that, if you believe in that, and I have a full and whole life and I realize it and I appreciate it, I'm grateful for it, and I'm doing good with me, and you come along and you try to tell me that my reality isn't real and that what you did to me didn't happen or didn't happen that way, or I'm gonna look at you like, get the fuck away from me, dude or girl, right? But if I'm unhealed and I feel bad constantly, whether I'm constantly angry or constantly anxious or constantly stressed or not taking care of my mental health, if I'm abusing drugs or abusing drugs and alcohol, or if I'm not financially secure, or if I'm not connected to my spirituality, and I haven't looked at the parts of myself that I don't want to look at, and I haven't looked at the parts of the things that need to be worked on, right? Then I'm going to be very susceptible to what you say. Why would I have any other reason to believe any different? I don't know any different. I didn't do the work. So that's why it's important that we have a good, healthy relationship with ourselves, because if we have that healthy relationship with ourselves first and foremost before anyone, then we will better navigate relationships for others and for ourselves, most importantly. And we have to take care of our mental health. If you want to do good in the world, or at least do good for yourself, you cannot sacrifice your mental health for nobody or nothing, right? If we sacrifice our mental health, we have nothing. I believe we exist in this human experience, in this human body, through multiple facets, right? We got the human perspective, our whole embodied perspective, but within that, we have our spiritual side of life that we can look through. We have our emotional body and our mental body and our intellect and our psychological and our parasympathetic nervous system and our nervous system and our senses and our clair abilities like clairvoyance and clairsentience and clair this and that, right? It's very... we experience and live and look at life and through life and all of that through multiple ways all at once, right? That's the human experience. But none of that matters and none of that is beneficial if we don't have good mental health. And if we don't have good mental health, then we can't navigate the spiritual side of life. If we don't have good mental health, we can't navigate properly our relationships with others and ourselves. If we can't navigate finances with poor mental health. We can't navigate the more complex issues in our lives without good mental health. So our best defense against toxic relationships is having good mental health, healthy mental health. What that looks like And how you get to it and how you practice it in your day-to-day is up to you. Only you know what is good. Only you know what is good and best for you. And it's going to look unique and different for everyone. But you're going to find people who are similar to you. You're going to find people who resonate with the way that you live and how powerful it feels to heal from the darkest moments of our life. How powerful it is and empowering to look back at those times and, by the grace of God, not be there anymore. I was there for a long time. Abandonment issues, and those abandonment issues resulted in me people-pleasing, and people-pleasing led me to self-sacrifice, and then self-sacrifice led to toxic relationships, intimately and with friends, and then it devolves even further into full-blown alcoholism and drug use and a lack of care and a lack of responsibility, and then borderline suicide ideation, and it devolves really quickly left unchecked. The good news, though, is when you begin the healing process, it's very difficult to stop, because you're like, holy shit, I feel a little bit better than yesterday. And then a year goes by, 2 years go by, and you're like, holy shit, I'm in a whole new wavelength of life. I didn't think feeling this way was possible, or I forgot what life was supposed to be like. We go from survival mode into creativity. And in creativity, that's where God plays. That's where God is. That's where the universe plays. That's where the universe is. The spirit of the universe. Whatever you identify most with, that's where it is. Those higher powers, the deeper sides of life, the fountain of life, the tree of life. All of these, beautiful things about life lie in creativity, not in unhealthy messes of human beings. And then you come to a point where you can laugh at yourself with humility, with understanding, with maturity. How beautiful to take your life from a point of borderline committing suicide to wanting better for either for your kids when you have them, or just in general for the people who come after you, because that's what life's about. It's not about me, it's about we. This is a we thing. It's a community thing. Self-centeredness, unhealthy selfishness, ego, unhealthy ego, and arrogance can only get you so far in life. But once you get that far in life, there's nothing else there. So you either stay miserable, or you gotta make a change. And so in this podcast, in this episode, I hope you make the choice to change. Change for you. Change for us. Change for the better, for the healthier. How about them apples, huh? The best defense against unhealthy relationships, whether they're family, friends, acquaintances, strangers, and ourselves, is mental health. Am I self-sacrificing? Am I putting others down? Am I putting myself down? Am I rising to the occasion, or am I dragging everyone and everything to hell? Or at least attempting to. Is this action or these words gonna improve someone's life or my life, or is it gonna harm it? These are questions that you must ask yourself throughout your healing journey. And it gets easier, and it gets a lot better. And it gets a lot more manageable. And you get a lot more clear. Then you actually know what you want. And when you know what you want, the universe gives it to you. You're just gonna ask. Seek and you shall find. Knock and a door shall open. Ask and you shall receive, right? Going into this episode, I didn't really know exactly what I was going to say, but I just knew I just had to get it off my heart. And I hope this reaches the right people who need to hear this message of hope, this message of strength, this message of responsibility and accountability. There's a future that you have not lived, and I hope you're there to live it. And this has been the Late Night Cool Down. I'm your host, Kyle Antoine, and it was a pleasure speaking with you. We may go down into toxicity and relationships and stuff more deeper, but I just really wanted to record this, and so I think we did a pretty good job. It's fucking cold where I'm sitting in a park right now on a bench, and the wind's just blowing on my neck. So this cool down's got to get warmed up. It's only midday as I'm recording. So anyways, cheers. Cool down, warm up, whatever's good for you, whatever's healthy for you, you do that, all right? It's been a pleasure. God bless.